Earlier this year, I made a video about the career of former starting pitcher Luis Tiant and why he absolutely needs to be in the Hall of Fame. Long story short, he was one of the best pitchers during his era and one of the most underrated of all time. 229 wins, 3,500 innings, and 66.1 WAR are just a handful of the many notable statistics he achieved during his career. Other than his unique windup, Tiant's most famous aspect is probably his 1968 season. Without going into too much detail, it's one of the greatest seasons ever by an American League pitcher. He recorded a 1.60 ERA in nearly 260 innings that year, which to this very day is the lowest ERA by any qualified American League pitcher in the live ball era. The live ball era being 1920 to present day. 104 years of baseball, and Tiant remains on top. With that being said, while it's undoubtedly the best season of his career, it's arguably not the most impressive performance he had. For a brief moment a decade later, Luis Tiant had an unbelievable pitching span where he, without exaggeration, saved his team's season. Before getting to Tiant's performance itself, there's a lot of build-up to this. Luis Tiant joined the Boston Red Sox in 1971, and he flourished with the club. In 7 seasons from 1971 to 1977, he was selected to the All-Star game twice, and 3 times did he place within the top 6 in Cy Young voting. That includes a top 5 finish in 1976, leading all Boston pitchers in wins, ERA, and innings pitched. After a down year in 1977, which saw him post the worst fall season of his career, Tiant regained his Cy Young caliber form in 1978. He started the year with a clean 7-0 record, and through his first 14 games by early July, he had a sparkling 2.87 ERA in 91 innings pitched. The ace of the club, Tiant was one of the many reasons why the Red Sox were running away with the division at the time. Their biggest lead in the American League East occurred in early July, specifically on July 8th, when they were 10 games ahead of the second-place Milwaukee Brewers with a 57-25 record. By far the best in all of Major League Baseball. Following that dominant start, Tiant was up and down. In 10 starts from mid-July to late August, he had a not bad but not good 3.96 ERA in 72 2/3 innings while going 2-5. For context, the league-wide ERA in the American League that season was 3.76, so Tiant was pitching a little below average. In spite of his struggles, the Red Sox didn't falter, and they had a commanding 84-48 record entering September. It was still the best record throughout Major League Baseball, and their lead in the division stood at 7 games ahead of the second-placed New York Yankees. Of course, if you know a thing or two about baseball, you know what happened. After demolishing the competition through the first 5 months, Boston collapsed in September. They started the month going 2-4 before succumbing to the worst 4-game span in Red Sox history. Playing at home, the Sox were swept in a 4-game series against the Yankees, being outscored 42-9. When the series concluded, Boston and New York were tied atop the division. A 7-game lead evaporated in the span of 10 days. I might add, the Yankees were as many as 14 games back in mid-July. Boston's downfall would continue, as following the sweep, they lost 3 of their next 4 before traveling to New York, where the Red Sox lost an additional 2 of 3 at Yankee Stadium. As for Luis Tiant, he was roughed up during this stretch as well. On September 11th, he allowed 4 runs across 7 innings against the Baltimore Orioles, and 4 days later against the Yankees, he once again allowed 4 runs, this time in 3 2/3 innings, taking the loss. Trying to right the ship, Tiant followed that up with one of the worst games of his career. In a game against the Detroit Tigers on September 19th, Luis Tiant didn't record a single out. He allowed 2 singles and a walk in the first inning before giving up a grand slam and was then immediately taken out of the game. Just 4 batters faced and all 4 scored. For those keeping track, in his last 3 games, Tiant allowed 12 earned runs across 10 2/3 innings for an ERA of 10.13. Out of the near 500 starts he made during his career, this was just the second one he failed to record an out. I don't think I need to thoroughly explain just how disappointing and revolting this was, not just for Luis Tiant, but for the Red Sox. For Tiant, He let down the team when they needed him the most, and overall, wasn't pitching at his ace potential. In his previous 15 starts dating back to mid-July, Tiant had a lowly 4.25 ERA. Not downright awful, but not good by any means. As for the Red Sox, it's pretty straightforward. A 10-game lead in July, a 7-game lead in September, and now they found themselves out of a playoff spot. They were on the cusp of the biggest season collapse in baseball history, possibly all of sports history, and it would be to their biggest rival in the New York Yankees. When Luis Tiant took the mound in the game on September 23rd, Boston stood 2 games out of first place with 8 left to play. While not eliminated by any means, they might as well have been. They were 7-15 in their last 22 games and were behind a Yankees team playing out of their minds. New York was 15-7 in their last 22 and were 45-19 dating back to mid-July. If there was any sliver of a chance for Boston to overcome this, they needed Luis Tiant to get back into his top form. On that September 23rd game, he did just that. Facing the Toronto Blue Jays on 3 days rest, he threw a complete game, allowing 1 run and striking out 6 batters. He picked up the victory, and Boston won the game 3-1. That victory would become a catalyst for the team, as it sparked a monumental comeback. Coupled with the Yankees' loss, the Red Sox were now only 1 game back. Both teams won their next 2, and with 5 games left, Tiant started on short rest again in a rematch against the Tigers. In a near must-win, he had another solid start, pitching 6 innings, allowing 2 runs, and striking out 3 to pick up another victory in a Boston 5-2 win. The Red Sox would win the next 3 games, extending their winning streak to 7 games. The Yankees themselves had a 6-game winning streak simultaneously, so entering the final game of the regular season, Boston was still 1 game back. In order to keep their season alive, they needed a win and a Yankees loss to force a tie-breaking Game 163. In the biggest game of the year, Luis Tiant was summoned to pitch once again on just 3 days rest. In an absolute must-win game, all Tiant did was have his best start of the season. Hosting the Blue Jays, Luis Tiant threw a complete game shutout. He allowed just 2 hits, both singles, walked none, and struck out 4 batters, giving the Red Sox their 8th consecutive win. Wouldn't you know it, but the Yankees, facing a 90-loss Cleveland Indians team, lost convincingly by a score of 9-2, forcing that tie-breaking Game 163. On the game he pitched, Tiant stated, "It may have been the most important game of my career, but I've been there before. If I don't win, we wouldn't be here tomorrow." Teammate Carl Yastrzemski praised Tiant, saying, "How about Tiant? Any one game you have to win over the last 5 years, he's the guy I'd give the ball to. Any key game which has had to be won, the man's won it. I wish he could pitch tomorrow. Maybe he might." Fellow teammate George Scott echoed that feeling when he said, "There was no question we win. I say that for one reason. In a big game, no matter what anyone tells you, Luis Tiant is the greatest pitcher I've ever seen. He'll be doing this when he's 90. While the Red Sox ended up losing that tiebreaker game to the Yankees to get eliminated from playoff contention, think about what Boston and Luis Tiant had to do just to get to that tiebreaker game. On the brink of the greatest collapse in baseball history, the team won the final 8 games in a row to even the standings with the Yankees. As for Tiant, during that 8-game span, he started 3 of them, the most of any pitcher, and all of them were on short rest. Despite that, he won all 3 games while allowing only 3 runs across 24 innings for an ERA of 1.13. He had as many wins in those 3 games as he did in his previous 17. Speaking of which, I might remind you how those 3 games came while Tiant was in the midst of pitching troubles, coming off perhaps the worst start of his career. It's as if out of nowhere, Luis Tiant turned the clock back 10 years to channel that dominance he had in 1968 to put on full display to save his team's season. Nearly 50 years later, it's still one of the most clutch spans any pitcher has ever had.